Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks for press and play. This is the first installment of what I hope will be many audio versions of the winter lecture series that the National Park Service puts on at the Visitor Center at Gettysburg National Military Park. Some of you may be familiar when you come here during the spring, summer, and fall. They have ranger programs out on the battlefield. But of course, in the winter, nobody wants to go out on the battlefield, so they do it inside in one of the auditoriums at the Visitor Center. And they are just as, to me, fun and informative as going out on the battlefield with one of these rangers. These rangers, just like our licensed battlefield guides, are kind of like the rock stars of the area around here. A lot of us look at them with a bit of reverence and awe because of all of the information that they've been able to cram into their brains. So, like I said, this is the first of hopefully many, and I'm going to do as many of these as I can. They're Saturdays and Sundays, so of course that's not always going to be possible, but I tend to go to these anyway, so I might as well record them and share them with you. And the reason why I'm doing this is because the Park Service isn't putting them up on YouTube this year. Here it is. It's the audio version. This one here is Matt Atkinson, and I promise you, from here on out, I'm not going to be doing these long intros, but this is just the introductory episode. So anyway, this is Matt Atkinson. Matt tends to draw a big crowd. They were turning people away for this one. And Matt comes out, he kind of works the crowd a bit. They all kind of do that. But, you know, he likes to have fun with us. So in the beginning, before he even gets to the actual lecture, you just hear him talking to the audience. And so that's what we're going to hear. I'm figuring out how to get good audio on this. So this might not be the best quality audio. I'm going to try to bring it up as much as I possibly can so you don't have to strain to hear, but I promise I will improve this as the weeks go on. Okay, so anyway, without further ado, this is brought to you by the patrons, my patrons over at patreon.com/addressinggettysburg. They help make this possible, and so please consider being a patron so it would be easier to do these. So that's, again, is patreon.com/addressinggettysburg. Okay, without further ado, here's Matt Atkinson, Freemasonry at Gettysburg, Fraternal Bonds Tested by Battle.
Anybody else? Right here. All right, so what's been happening with old Matt? Now, you're probably going to set the record for the youngest visitor I ever had, but I'm going to count that baby in my statistics. I want you to know. I got, are these seats open right here beside y'all? All right, if you come down here, y'all, how many you got? 4? I got 3. You may have to, yeah. Two down here.
Unless she's one. Oh, there she is.
One over here, one over here, one over here.
We got a brand new one. How old? How old is he?
7 months.
7 months? They wouldn't even take me out of the house. You know, it's really weird how you revert back to childhood or babies. You know, you're born with no hair, no teeth. Go back to this. No, it wasn't funny. I thought that was funny. All right. So what's old Matt been up to? So a couple big things happened to me. In 2019, I guess. In 2018, I had a guy contact me. You never believe this. He watched the video, and at some video, I don't watch myself, but at some video, he said, I said something about Hank Williams at some point, and he came and he wanted to meet me for dinner, and at that time, I was not the, you might have to write this down, I was not the quintessential expert, and I don't guess you would say now, but anyway, he came to Gettysburg with his wife, and I went to Blue and Gray. I'd never met this guy, never seen him before. We corresponded. I showed up for dinner, and his name was Chris Bradshaw from Hiawassee, Georgia, and yeah, good luck pronouncing that one. But I got in there, and I asked him if you know anything about Hank Williams. You know, Hank Williams died on New Year's Eve. What was that, 52, 53, depending on when you have him dying, driving in West Virginia. And I asked Chris, what kind of engine that Cadillac had in it. Because Hank was driving a brand new baby blue ragtop, I think it was a 52 Cadillac, and he named the engine. I said, this dude knows what he's talking about right here. So anyway, follow me here. Follow me here. He's a big Hank Jr. fan. And so his brother is in charge of the county in Georgia, a commissioner or something like that, and Hank Jr. came to Hiawassee. And I thought to myself, he said, we're going to go down there and we're going to see what we can do about it. So we went down there, and I got there we got there at 8 or 9 in the morning. We saw the band check and all that. Meanwhile, Hank Jr.'s in Farmville, Virginia. That's near Appomattox, if you don't know, metal detecting. He's a huge Civil War buff, all right? So anyway, he rolls in, and I had never been around anybody famous like that. And I'm a big fan of his daddy, and I'm sure he's heard it. I mean, what do you say to Hank Jr.? He's, 60-something years old. I'm sure he's heard it before. I'm a big fan of your dad. So anyway, the guy got me in the line, the meet and greet, where you pay all that money for 30 seconds with him. And so I got at the tail end because I was free. So we got up at the end. He's shaking picture, and it is rolling on out, and the band starts thumping in the background. I'm backstage or whatever, and I get up to him, and so what do you say to him? I said, well, Mr. I came up to him. I said, what do you call him? I said, Mr. Williams. I said, my name's Matt Atkinson. I'm from Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and I work at the military park. He's had a lot of concerts. And he goes, what? He goes, where? Gettysburg. He starts talking about his Confederate ancestor. I think that's what he was talking about. I mean, he's holding my hand, and I'm just like, I had a picture, but I just finished the program like literally 20 minutes ago, so before I came in here. So we didn't have time to put the slide on here. But he starts telling me about his Confederate ancestor. And he was wounded at Gettysburg on Little Round Top, and he went home, lost an arm and a leg, went home, fathered all these children. I think that's what he was telling me. Anyway, he got around to it, and he said he was in the 6th Alabama. Now, you Gettysburg buffs ought to know that the 6th Alabama wasn't on Little Round Top. What you Gettysburg buffs failed to realize, though, is that when you're dealing with Hank Williams Jr., the son of the legendary Hank Williams, he wants the 6th Alabama on Little Round Top. All he needs to do is call. I get him up there. Whatever he wants to do. All right, that was a highlight, man. I couldn't even go to sleep that night. Thinking about in March, I got to go back to Alabama for black powder training down in Anniston. We have a weekend off. It's a 2-week training. And I'm thinking about going and chasing his daddy's ghost around Alabama, like his birthplace and the church and all that. There's apparently a hot dog stand in Montgomery that he liked too. So all this trivia that you have. And if you fast forward, could somebody back there, Al, because you're the only one I can see, make out. Well, hang on a minute. John, I probably got 15 seats out here.
I'm bringing them in.
Come on in. I got plenty of seats. Yeah, if anybody's out there, we got plenty of seats. So the other big news. So I've been living until yesterday. I was living in a park house, which none of y'all ever know about because it's not famous one. But there's an old 1902 farmhouse behind Eisenhower. It was bought by the government as a buffer zone, a view shed so Ike's farm would be pristine. So I've been living in this old Queen Anne farmhouse. Well, I've been paying $1,100 a month rent on this thing, in case y'all thought I was getting a deal. And then the AO, we call him AO, administrative officer, came to me and said they were about to jack the rent up on me another couple $100. And I said, well, I was planning on dying in this house, because I like the location or whatever, not anytime soon. And And that's another good story too, but not dying, but Hank Williams in that house, wiping my car out. But I got to tell the first story first. So y'all just be patient. So they jacking the rent up, so I had to find, I went and house hunting. And you know, I've always, you always have an idea. I can live in anything, believe me. I can live in anything. And have lived in anything. You haven't lived until you move into an attic apartment with one of those old feet bathtubs, and they've converted it with one of those cheap circle shower curtains that you have to step into, that you can't move in and out. If you stick an elbow this way, it juts out of the curtain right there. Now that's living. So anyway, I was looking, and I almost bought a house in Fairfield. That's where the kids go to school. But I ran across, right before I pulled the trigger on, I ran across this house in Cashtown. And I've always wanted to live in a quote-unquote cabin. And I finally found this darn thing. All right, and we moved up to the top. And, well, that ain't, but my hand's still sore from buying this thing. If you've ever bought a house, you know what that joke is right there. But I moved to the top, and I want you to know that my old 2002 Honda Accord will take that mountain just fine. I sure am glad I didn't buy a better car for it, though, say the least. But anyway, the best thing about it is the old park house. This is the small things in life you people fail to appreciate because you've already got it. But my kids and I were sitting in there. Christmas Day is the first day they came over. And my kids and I were standing there, and I got twin girls, if you didn't know. And one of my girls said, Dad, I got to go to the bathroom. And you know, when you got twins, everything comes in twos. And the other one goes, I got to go too. But she always goes first. I said, ladies. I call them ladies. I said, ladies, what's the problem here? We got more than one bathroom. Now that's luxury. Thank you. There's more than one bathroom right there. Is it time? Overtime? I was late again. That's the small things right there. First thing I did when I moved in there, I was looking at those bedrooms and I was thinking to myself, yeah, I'll park them girls right behind me. I have a hard time sneaking in and out from my back bedroom. Floor squeaks too. I don't think I'm going to fix it.
What about the window? They have a window.
Well, yeah, hadn't thought of that. You know, in those horror movies, they nail them shut. I think that's against the law. Okay, Reckoning Ball. Am I going to have an easy time with my twin girls when they reach the teenage years?
Don't need the ball for that.
Oh! Can't read it. It says, reckon not. Oh, I saw y'all earlier. I love this, man. I love that get-up. Y'all put a lot of thought into that. Come on in. So who you portraying? What generals are you?
Robert E. Lee. And I'm Grant.
Who's Grant? Back here. Really? I got a Grant and Lee story, because I got a story for everything. And I got a Gettysburg related story. So I'm in the Mexican place over on Buford Avenue with the ubiquitous red sauce. And I walk in there and I'm rounding the corner, I'm going to the bathroom, and lo and behold, there's General Grant and there's General Lee eating. And I was in a hurry, I was going to the bathroom, so I blew on past them. I was coming back by, I had more time. And I said, I didn't know you boys like tacos. And without missing a beat, General Grant picks up his taco he's got in his hand. He looks at me sideways and he goes, learn to like him in the Mexican War. True story. That happened to me right here, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. All right, we're going to talk about something unrelated to Lee or Grant because I don't think that they were part of this. I have got a lot of information, which we'll see how much I can get through, but I got too much for an hour, so y'all hang on to yourself. All right. We've also got a couple filmers, and we've got audio, which is a new gig right here. So the problem with audio when you don't have video is you have to figure out what these sounds are, okay? So the people back home can sit here and they can figure this out. Now, if you know what that sound is, you might need help. Yeah. To your health. We're going to talk about the Freemasons, and I hope I can do it justice. The first thing I guess we could talk about is what is Freemasonry, and that is probably the hardest thing to define because everybody, the origins of it, etc., what it is. I mean, it's a lot of different opinions on that. Depends on what book you're reading. So the origins of it are hard to find. Freemasons claim a fraternity back to the building of King Solomon's Temple. The first documented Freemason lodge dates from Edinburgh, Scotland in the 16th century, and the first governing body dates from 1717 in London. Now there are some that, take them back, as I said, all the way to the temple. By 1723, the constitutions of the Freemasons were assembled and published, and although that document explicitly refers to a meeting with Prince Edwin, the son, who was the son of a 10th century Saxon king, I won't pronounce a lot of words in here, Athelstan, no supporting evidence exists of that. Most historians contend, though, that the Masons are descended from the medieval stone mason guilds. So you're basically talking about a union. From the book Freemasonry in Context, the following synopsis is taken. So this is not me. This is from Freemasonry in Context. Relatively little known, since the beard is aging me, I guess I should go ahead and get this over with too, right? My eyes are not giving way. My arms are just getting shorter. That's the only problem which I have right now. What do you think? Walmart chippies? You get 3 for $5. These are only 125s. Still in good shape. Relatively little is known about the origins of Freemasonry. It is clear that the fraternity has, to some extent, its antecedents in the ancient stonemasons guild of medieval Europe, but an exact pedigree has thus far eluded Masonic scholars. What is known is that the Scottish Freemasonry transitioned from a trade guild into a social club. It may be assumed that English Freemasonry followed suit at a similar time and in like manner, but this remains unproven. It is clear, however, that the social club reflected Enlightenment sensibilities while retaining the organizational structure of a union. The most notable of these labor features are 3 levels, or degrees, of lodge membership, corresponding to a typical craftsman's career. The first, second, and third degrees, which are the entered apprentice, the fellow craft or journeyman, and the master mason degrees. With the founding of America, of course, came the Masons. And another slide. Who's that figure right there? Now, they've cut it off since 9/11, but if you remember before 9/11, you were able to walk up and down the Washington Monument in D.C. on the National Mall. And inside there, what you miss today because you can't walk the stairwell anymore, is that there are stones in there dedicated from each state lodge, all the way up and down that staircase right through there to Washington. And of course, some people think that streets and the layout of the city, etc., has Masonic origins of it. The first American lodge was, according to this, was chartered in Boston in 1733. Many of the founding fathers were Masons, and of course Washington being one of them. Freemasonry took off along with many other secret societies, such as the Odd Fellows, the United Ancient Order of Druids, the Ancient Order of Foresters, Society of Red Men, and the Ancient Order of Hibernians. I'm surprised y'all heard of that. Occasionally, fraternal societies delved into politics, such as the Know-Nothings, which were nativist, or the Knights of the Golden Circle, which are similar, but they're political organizations. The fortunes, though, in American history of Freemasonry took a downward turn in 1826. Probably the most notable thing that happens to Masonry is I got to find a sweet spot. Is the disappearance of William Morgan, who was it's up to debate, but he claimed to have been a Mason, but more importantly, he was going to publish Masonic secrets. And long story short, Morgan disappeared. And cue the Godfather track. I'm sure they left the cannolis. Okay, all right. So in the backlash to all that, many men left the Masonic Lodge. And I'm in the history of the Gettysburg Lodge, following here, this is local history. The Gettysburg Lodge, I forget the year, but it was founded in the 1830s, and it actually went, what they call a Masonic knowledge, it went dark, meaning that it was no more members, and that all came from this backlash. And it reconstituted in the 1850s. But anyway, in 1828, the Anti-Masonic Party was created with the goal of eliminating Masonry. From 1828 to 1835, the number of Masonic lodges in New York fell from 490 to just 80. And membership declined from 20,000 members to 3,000. Between 1850 and 1860, Masonry came roaring back, tripling its membership from 66,000 to 200,000 members in 5,000 lodges nationwide. To define what Freemasonry is a difficult task. A gentleman named Albert G. Mackey, who was a Masonic historian, said first and foremost that Masonry is, quote, a science which engages us in the search after divine truth, and which, if rightly understood, enables us to assist that search by a knowledge of what was done in the same great labor by the symbolisms of the ancient sages. That's the end of his quote. But the institutions were also religious in character. Quote, the very science which it inculcates is in itself the science of religion. Not a religion of forms and creeds, but a universal religion whose theology embraces the important dogmas of a supreme creator and of a future existence. And hence the religion of Freemasonry is its science, and its science is its religion. That's pretty deep, isn't it? But so what it's saying is it combines both. Mackey went on to contend that Freemasonry has two levels as an institution. On one level, it serves as a charitable institution. On the other level, it is a social organization that allows individuals to remove social hierarchy of rich and poor and other prejudices to meet, quote, upon one common level of brotherhood and equality. When you're within the lodge, Mackey wrote, there are basically no social hierarchy to it. In other words, you could walk in there as the richest gentleman in Fauquier County, Virginia, and you could sit by a dirt poor farmer. You're all equal in that lodge. And that goes back to the Enlightenment principles and so forth back in the day. All right, so that's sort of synopsis. And, you know, you can, this is, I believe this one's from France. I think so. You know, you can pick up, Masonic definitions, etc., is just basically until you pick up the next book. And everybody slightly tweaks it. But it It is also a, how would you say? Masons, when they join the fraternity, pledge loyalty to each other. You ever heard of this in our nation's history? Pledging loyalty, our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honors. You ever heard of something like that? All right, I'm not saying that's the Masonic, but there's a lot of Masons in Philadelphia. All right, and so when you think about that, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to fast forward it to the American Civil War. And now you take Masons who have pledged each other. As a Mason, if you are a member from Pennsylvania, you can attend lodges, or you can attend meetings, as they call it, attend lodge in Florida. Got a good friend down vacation RVing in Florida right now, and that's what he does in his retirement. He just loves to go to different lodges for whatever, really likes that. So you can go anywhere in the world, in other words, and you are accepted as one of these brothers. Now, fast forward to the American Civil War. Now you got American Masonic institutions, lodges, and America itself is splitting on both sides. How do you reconcile the promise or oaths you've given to your brothers in order to, support them, etc., and kill them on the other hand? This was a huge debate among the Masons. The Masonic Lodge of Tennessee wrote Pennsylvania, for instance. You can find that letter online. And they said, what are we going to do here, guys? And the huge lengthy correspondence going back and forth between them. But war is war. And so they grappled with that. Now, the Battle of Gettysburg. One more thing about the Masonic tradition. The symbolism of Masonry, the biggest, most well-known symbol besides the big G, which I already showed you, is the apron. And basically the apron symbolizes a Mason and his office or his level. It's probably the greatest symbol of Masonic tradition. When the fraternity was founded, the early Masons adopted the tools and traditions of the stonemasons, and among them were the protective aprons. The apron serves to remind the Mason of his commitment to uphold the values of the craft. Now that's how my first story is the reason I'm telling you all this, because it is related to an apron and the Battle of Gettysburg. All right. In the May 5th, 1909 issue of the Gettysburg Compiler, which is a local newspaper, you look really good in that uniform. Anybody ever tell you that? No. No ever told you that, General Grant? Have you shook General Slocum's hand in front of you? No? Right there. In the May 5th, 1909 Gettysburg Compiler, the following story appeared about the loss and retrieval of a Masonic apron. After the fight of July 2nd, John Kunkel found the apron, Masonic apron, lying among some rocks on Culp's Hill. I don't have an exact spot, and yes, I wanted to trace this down more, but I just hit dead ends. Kunkel secured the apron and on April 12, 1863, dutifully handed it over to the Perseverance Lodge of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. For years, the apron hung on the walls of the lodge until finally being removed and placed in a drawer with several other artifacts. The apron remained in obscurity, if you can imagine this, until March of 1908, when a Dr. John Rannick, I believe, the worshipful master, that's the head guy of the Perseverance Lodge, happened across it while cleaning out the cabinet. Upon closer examination, the doctor discovered the name E.L. Fonda stenciled on a portion of the apron. The burning question for Dr. Rannick was Fonda still alive? His first inquiry went to the manufacturer of the apron, and they did, since they had an address. No, was the response. The doctor next wrote to the Adjutant General in Washington and received a negative response. 2 letters written to the Secretary of War produced information that an E.L. Fonda from New York had enlisted in August 11th of 1862. The doctor then solicited any information on Fonda from the Adjutant General of New York and the Grand Lodge of New York to no avail. And finally, the War Department suggested contacting the Pension Department. And from this finally came the information that E.L. Fonda resided in. Some of y'all had to help me. Watervliet, New York. You've been there?
Adirondack region, yes, I had a friend that lived there.
Dr. Rainick dispatched 4 letters to Fonda to no avail. Let me just go ahead and tell you, when a Mason sends you a letter and you don't respond, they get really uptight about that. All right? They really get uptight about that. The 5th letter, the doctor, quote, made very strong and insisted upon a reply. Finally, on March 17, 1909, a letter arrived from Averill Park, New York, bearing a reply from Fonda. And part of it says this: I enlisted in the 14th New York, that's the 14th United States Infantry, in 1862, and we were assigned to the Army of the Potomac. The apron I had with me stored in my knapsack. On May 1st, our regiment was transferred across the Rappahannock River to join the rest of the Army. This was the opening day of the Battle of Chancellorsville, and in the hurry of forming, I lost my knapsack. I did not miss it until in the midst of the fighting hours later, and I never expected to recover it. I took part in the Battle of Gettysburg, Fonda said, and where you say it was found. Our regiment was stationed at Little Round Top. Remember the regulars, you Gettysburg buffs will remember that. And he goes on to state that basically, he thanks him. What had happened, and the enduring mystery right here, is he loses the apron at the Battle of Chancellorsville. And obviously, if you know your Civil War history, the Union loses the Battle of Chancellorsville. And subsequently, some rebel, who I suppose was a Mason, I could not find that out, obviously, but I don't know why he would have kept it otherwise, to tote all that weight around and pick that apron up. And at some point, that rebel at some place was shot on Culp's Hill. And that apron, when they were pilfering through that stuff, or maybe it was just laying on the ground, that apron came back to light. Now, is that not a small world to have that apron physically carried all the way from Virginia and retrieved again in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania? So they got him his apron back. Who's this gentleman? I hadn't seen that picture of Chamberlain, so that's the reason I put it up there for you. If you're listening to audio right now, you'll have to pay the extra $2.99 a month in order to see the picture of Chamberlain, to which I'm referring to. The first thing I thought about that thing was, how in the heck did he ever eat? Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, perhaps no other person personifies Gettysburg to today's average visitor. All right, so don't start writing me letters about how he doesn't do anything for you anymore. Cast as the main character in the book Killer Angels and brought to life by actor Jeff Daniels, in the subsequent movie Gettysburg, Chamberlain and his 20th Maine Regiment have surpassed the original hero of Little Round Top, who was Gouverneur K. Warren. Now, Chamberlain, a lot of you know the Chamberlain story, and it's a pretty in-depth story, but Chamberlain was a professor at Bowdoin. My God, my first tour on Little Round Top. Did I ever tell you this story? My first tour on Little Round Top, I said Bowdoin. I'm dating myself because Bobby Bowden was still coaching down Florida State. I said Bowden. You know, I thought, and this would only happen to Matt. Guess who was on the tour? An alumnus. I thought that dude was going to come out of his skin. Bowden. Just say it right. On the eve of the departure for the theater of war, Chamberlain's deep-seated religious views melded with the Freemasonry tenet of belief in a supreme being. It is not known who introduced Freemasonry to Chamberlain, possibly some of the Bowdoin faculty. United Lodge number 8's records reveal, though, a wave of local men joining the lodge on the eve of going to war. With time being of the essence, Chamberlain needed help to complete the degrees before departure. So what do I mean by that? I don't know where this came from. Traditionally, though, when you join the Masons, if it happens as it's supposed to happen, you gain a new degree about once a month. So it takes 3 months to be raised to a Master Mason right there. So Chamberlain doesn't have 3 months. So what's he going to do? In order to get his degrees faster, they had to petition the Grand Lodge of Maine. And the Grand Lodge agreed to expedite his degree work for the fee of $5, which he paid. At a special communication, that's how it's worded here, of United Lodge held on the evening of August 27, 1862, the secretary presented a dispensation from the Grand Master himself, Josiah Drummond, to allow Chamberlain to take his Masonic degrees in less than the usual prescribed time. This in itself was a little unusual, for dispensations were usually handled by the district deputy Grand Master. A ballot was taken and Chamberlain was accepted for the entered apprentice degree. Now there's got to be somewhere in here some Masons in the crowd, which I think would amaze them. While he was being notified of his acceptance and in the process of being brought to the lodge to take the degree, another ballot was taken and it was voted to confer upon him the fellowcraft degree. Thus, on the very same night, he was initiated as an entered apprentice and passed to the degree of fellowcraft. And at 8 o'clock the very next morning, the lodge reconvened and he was raised to the sublime degree of Master Mason. That was a long night for Joshua Chamberlain. This was indeed very rapid work within the constitutional allowance of the craft. On September 12, 1862, he was proposed as a member, and on October 7, 1862, a ballot was taken and he was officially elected a member of the United Lodge. Now Chamberlain goes on. Oops, got one away. Chamberlain left for the war with the shield of Masonic brotherhood by his side, and 3 years later returned with honor. So my point is, ladies and gentlemen, if you think about it, to go back a few sentences, what I said earlier, why are all these men rushing to get in the Masons before they go off to war? Twirl that around in your head. Why is that so important to these guys? When they're going to a theater of operations, why do they want that Masonic membership? And it goes back to that fraternity. That's why they wanted it. Because they knew wherever they went that they could receive aid from a fellow Mason. 3 years later, Chamberlain returned from the war with honor. The much thinner ranks that returned home to Maine stood as a stark testimony to the battles in which they were engaged. Antietam, Shepherdstown, Fredericksburg, Middleburg, Gettysburg, Rappahannock Station, Mine Run, Wilderness, Laurel Hill, North Anna, Bethesda Church, you know these, you know your Civil War, Petersburg, Weldon Railroad, People's Farm, Hatcher's Run, Quaker Road, White Oak Road, Five Forks, and Appomattox. At every engagement stood brother Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain. You're really going to impress me if you get this. Well, maybe you won't get it at all. Who's that guy? Oh, did I stump 150 people? Huh? Nobody? I'm supposed to have some LBGs or some LBG candidates in here. Edward Cross. He just doesn't have his bandana on, so you don't recognize him. He is the colonel of the 5th New Hampshire, and if you've forgotten the story, I'll tell it to you again real fast. Cross is the guy that usually wore a red bandana into battle. Why is that? I guess it made him prominent. You know, the men see it. I mean, how many people wearing a red bandana in the middle of bullets flying around? That's not very healthy. At the Battle of Gettysburg, he donned a black bandana, handkerchief or some type of that. And Hancock, General Hancock came, we'll talk about here shortly. General Hancock came riding up to him. He says, "Colonel, today you will win your star." Something along those lines. And Cross turned to him and he says, "General, this is my last battle." And that's why some people say he was wearing the black bandana. But you're probably more familiar with him because he is one of his story, he's subsequently shot in the Rose Woods, which is adjacent to the wheat field, but is one of the few locations on the battlefield where we can actually place his actual death site, which is where the monument, the regimental monument is, and the large boulder, which is at that intersection in the woods, is where the Confederate sharpshooter was. No, don't scratch that. I did not say the word sharpshooter. No, it's not the guy that got killed down at the Devil's Den and subsequently shot everybody on this battlefield, all right? A Confederate soldier, the sergeant in his unit, saw the Confederate that shot Cross and stood there very patiently and loaded his weapon up and waited for that Reb to come out from behind that rock again. And he avenged Cross. It's one of the few places on the battlefield we have that much detail. That's a good picture, Al. You don't have that? All right, but this has nothing to do. This is Masonic, but it has nothing to do with the Battle of Gettysburg. It's a cool story, though. At the Battle of Antietam, Colonel Cross and his men were pinned down by rebel sharpshooters. Now, what he's talking about, this is going to be quotes from, the first-hand account. I don't know, you'll hear the story. I don't know exactly what they're talking about in some of this, alluding to, I should say. But nevertheless, maybe somebody in the crowd will. Okay, early in the morning, one of the wounded rebels who lay just outside the pickets called one of the New Hampshire men and handed him a little slip of paper on which he had evidently, with great difficulty, succeeded in making, this is in italics, some mystic signs in a circle with a bit of stick wet in blood. Can you imagine getting a message like that? The soldier begged to hand the paper to some Freemason as soon as possible. And he took it to Colonel E.E. Cross of his regiment. The colonel was a master mason, but could not read the mystic token, it belonging to a higher degree. He therefore sent for Captain J.B. Perry of the 5th Regiment, who was a member of a higher degree of Freemasonry, and showed him the letter. Captain Perry at once said that there was a brother Mason in great peril and must be rescued. Colonel Cross instantly sent for several brother Masons in the regiment, told the story, and in a few moments, 4 quote-unquote brothers of the mystic tie were crawling stealthily through the corn to find the brother in distress. He was found, placed on a blanket, and at great risk drawn out of the range of rebel rifles, and then carried to the 5th New Hampshire Hospital. He proved to be, the soldier they rescued, proved to be the 1st Lieutenant, John Ogden, of Company K from the 10th Alabama. And those Union soldiers risked their lives to go out there in no man's land and pull this guy off the battlefield for whatever sign that he made that day. Of course, the 1st Lieutenant was very thankful. He was badly wounded in the thigh and the breast, and a few hours later, he probably would have perished. Now, fast forward to Gettysburg, and that story I just told you about Colonel Cross being killed. When Cross was killed at Gettysburg, his loss was deeply felt by his men. His body was accompanied, when he died, by Captain Welcome, I don't know what, I guess his mother was happy he was here. His name is Welcome A. Crafts. What do you call him? Welcome? Welcome. Welcome, come over here. Welcome. Welcome. You were in a crowd, that'd be weird, wouldn't it? Welcome. It's like going to your Christmas reunion, you know. If you ever do this, whatever your last name is, get all the family, when they're all crowded in there together, like go in there and say, "Oh, Mrs. Atkinson." Well, everybody's Mrs. Atkinson. And never mind. All right. Don't try that. So Welcome A. Crafts escorted the body to the native town, Cross's native town of Lancaster, New Hampshire. The ceremonies were under the direction of North Star Lodge Number 8, ancient, free, and accepted Masons of Lancaster. Quote, the fraternity in large numbers assisted in the solemn ceremonies, and amid a throng of friends who had known him from boyhood, the brave soldier, the true friend, the impulsive and honorable man, was borne to his final resting place in the valley he loved so well, amid all his wanderings, where he now sleeps unmindful of the din of battle or the shouts over that victory for which he laid down his gallant life. Here's another quick one to show you, and this is reversed. Instead of the Union helping the Confederates, how about the Confederates helping the Union? This is from the history of the 2nd Regiment of the New Hampshire Volunteers. And they were at the Peach Orchard. Quote, here also, talking about the second day's fighting here at Gettysburg, here also Captain Hubbard of the same company received his death wound. I can't imagine this, y'all. He was shot in the forehead, but regained his feet and wandered aimlessly about for some time after the rebel column had passed him. So he's basically out of his mind, but he's walking. Some of his company who were captured learned from their rebel guards that he lived about 2 hours. Being a Mason and having an emblem displayed, his body was buried and his grave carefully marked by members of the order in the rebel ranks, so that the body was subsequently recovered and identified. Unknown Confederate Masons or Southern Masons took care of him right here. I'm curious as to what the symbol was he had on it. Talking about July 2nd, too, a lot of you, or some of, I've recognized a lot of faces, a lot of you have gone on the Ambrose Wright walk with me, which goes from the Virginia Memorial. This is July 2nd now, it goes, but not Pickett's Charge, but it goes from Virginia Memorial up to the high water mark, tracing Ambrose Wright's Georgia Brigade. In the aftermath of that, you know, Wright gets up there, he punches into the copse of trees. Some people think this makes Lee attack the next day at that spot, et cetera, et cetera. In the aftermath of the repulse of the Georgians, though, the 106th Pennsylvania is advancing from the angle, or the high water mark as we know it as today, and they're advancing down to the Emmitsburg Road to the Cadore Farm. If you haven't been to Gettysburg, or not that much, it's the big red building, farmhouse and barn right in front of the high water mark. As they approached this farm, they found a large group of rebels in the barn, and from which an officer soon advanced, waving a handkerchief as a flag of truce. Captain Ford, of Company I, called Colonel Curry's attention to it, and he directed him to take his company to meet it. The company faced his company to the right. The captain faced his company to the right and marching by the flank with an old newspaper fixed on the bayonet. It advanced to the house and was met by Captain Sneed from a Georgian from Wright's brigade. He informed them, the Union, that their commander, Colonel William Gibson of the 48th Georgia, was dangerously wounded and would die for want of attention, and they desired to have him brought within our lines for treatment. This is from the regimental history. And that nearly the whole regiment stood by him. Captain Ford informed him they would be glad to give the colonel the attention he required and demanded their instant surrender, and requested the officers to give up their swords. I love how they wrote back then. Now listen to this. It's succinct, and you know exactly what he's saying. They asked him to surrender. Quote, this Captain Sneed very much objected to do. Well, guess what? They ended up surrendering, and they marched him back, and et cetera, et cetera. But the point of all this is that apparently Captain Ford and Colonel Gibson were Masons. And what most people Gettysburg buffs have never read is that Gibson actually wrote Ford, oh, I didn't know that, how you like that, wrote him a letter thanking him for saving his life. Right here. And what is particularly, what most people have not picked up over the years is what Gibson, and you have to see the original to know what I'm talking about, but on the original, Gibson underlined 3 words when he wrote Ford. Now, why would he do that? Right there. If you're listening to audio right now, this is the point in the program where you're wondering if it's still working or not. Which is the limitations of audio.
Masonic hope? Like what, Masonic?
He thanked him for being a brother Mason.
I believe he's also, I believe he's also saying the doctor is one too. What I think he's saying, but he's identifying himself, is what he's doing. Everybody read it?
Yeah.
Who's that guy?
That's Barksdale.
Who gets your color? Huh? What do you think of this shade? Now the last two, I'm going to spend my most time on Barksdale and Armistead because they're probably our 2 most famous Masonic connections here on this battlefield. In the movie Gettysburg, Martin Sheen, aka General Lee, asked, nobody wants to do it with me, General Barksdale, is Mississippi ready for this day? Mississippi's ready, replied actor Lester Kinsolving. Bet you didn't know that. Yeah. This apocryphal scene has haunted the writer of this article, which would be me, a Mississippi native for 2 decades of service at the battlefields. Visitors have periodically asked said author, who is now speaking to you at said time, if he's ready. And you know, most of the time, said author is not. On July 2nd, the real William Barksdale was quite ready for battle. In fact, his whole life had prepared him for this moment. His grandfather, Nathaniel B. Barksdale, fought in the American Revolution before moving west to Tennessee in 1808. His father, William, had fought in the War of 1812, where he fought the bloody British at the town of New Orleans. Oh, I'm going to connect the dots for you. You don't think I can do this, but I can do this right here. All right, follow me here. Okay. New Orleans, Barksdale, etc. Who sang the Battle of New Orleans? Johnny Horton, right? Follow me here. Hank Williams. Follow me, I'm going to connect the dots here for you. It's 3 steps from Hank, all right? Hank Williams' first wife was Audrey. That's when all the songs are left. But right before he died, for a few months, he was married to a lady named Bobby. And anyway, his second wife, they got married in New Orleans too. They got married 3 or 4 times. They sold tickets and went out and did all that. But when Hank died, his second wife ended up marrying Bobby Horton. That's how you connected to the bloody Battle of New Orleans, right there. The song right there. And I just came up with that off the top of my head, and that's probably my proudest moment of this whole program right here. Let's see what the reckoning ball says about it. Was that a proud moment? Get it up here. Fooling with me. All right. Bless your heart. You want to try it? That also won't make any sense on the audio. All right, Mississippi's elector sent her newly adopted son, remember he's born in Tennessee, to the United States House of Representatives in 1853. At some point, William Barksdale also became a member of Columbus Lodge 3%. The slavery debate, I know I'm stretching it out, but this incident is so connected with Barksdale, and I've had so many questions about it over the years. It's not Masonic related, but it's such a good story. I have to tell this one. The slavery debate in the House of Representatives led to many heated arguments and fisticuffs and duels on the floor. And Barksdale stood right in the middle of many of them. The most famous fight occurred in the early morning hours of February 6, 1858, when pro-secessionist Lawrence Keat, a friend of Barksdale, and abolitionist Galatia Grow of Pennsylvania squared off. In one account, Wisconsin Representative John, how come they don't make politicians like this? Wisconsin Representative John Bowie Knife Potter. Let's get Bowie Knife on them 6 o'clock news. Why don't you go down there and give him the amendment? In this account, Potter grabbed Barksdale by the head to shockingly discover the Mississippian wore a toupee. "Hooray, boys, I've got his scalp," shouted Potter, and the floor erupted in laughter. The New York Times, however, reported that Cadwallader Washburn, you gotta love that mother, Cadwallader Washburn actually snatched the toupee while rushing to the defense of his brother Elihu. All right, here's an actual quote. New York Times, "Horrible to relate, Mr. Barksdale's wig came off in Cadwallader's left hand, and his right fist expended itself with tremendous force against the resisting air. This ludicrous incident unquestionably did much toward restoring good nature subsequently. And its effect was heightened not a little by the fact that in the excitement of the occasion, Barksdale restored his wig wrong side foremost." Regardless of which account is correct, the Hirsute affair has followed Barksdale to the present day. If you notice, I got a pointer here. There he is. And there, see? Cast your sketch. Now, come on, that was a good story. People hard to entertain. Y'all don't straighten up, I'm going to keep y'all past kickoff. As the war clouds gathered on the horizon, Barksdale stated, "Never have I desired a dissolution of the Union." That's hard for me to believe. However, the sectional, quote, "the sectional and hostile platform of the Republicans in the election of Lincoln made Barksdale view the U.S. government as no longer representing his people." When Mississippi exercised her right to self-determination on January 9th, 1861, Barksdale resigned 3 days later. March of 61, he's a quartermaster general in the State Army of Mississippi before receiving a colonel's commission in the 13th Infantry in the regular Confederate Army. His subsequent performance during the 7 Days campaign led to his promotion to brigade command. At Gettysburg, with the charge imminent, Barksdale summoned his regimental commanders to give them final instructions. "The line must be broken," he said. "To do so, let every officer and man animate his comrades by his personal presence in the front line." The order to go forward came shortly thereafter. and Barksdale rode down the line. Every time I drive through that intersection right there at the Mississippi Monument, I think about that. If I had a time machine, I'd love to see Barksdale come at the end of that brigade, and he came riding down through. He had a sort of a light-colored horse, and he had longer hair. Now, some people think he grew it out or whatever, but I think he had transitioned from the toupee, and he had actually grown a comb over. And so, you know, in the middle of battle, who cares about a comb over? So his comb over had come back, and so that's why he's got. That's just my theory on it. Nothing wrong with comb over. Got one myself. So anyway, he comes riding down through there, and this long white hair is flowing from behind. He's got his hat in his head, and his men are just looking at him. He's getting them pumped up. I always want to see that moment. Barksdale shouted, "Attention, Mississippians, battalions, forward!" Raising the old rebel yell, Barksdale's men surged ahead, and Union artillery tore gaping holes in the ranks, but nothing stopped the momentum. Nearing the peach orchard, That's my favorite non-Troyani print. Union soldiers began to give way, and the Mississippians rolled right through the salient. Wheeling his brigade to the left, his men continued to roll up the Union line. But by now his brigade had suffered heavy casualties. His regimental commanders urged Barksdale to halt the advance. "No," shouted Barksdale, "crowd them. We have them on the run. Move your regiments." Onward they went, driving the 120th New York from in front of them. Barksdale now wheeled his brigade to the right instead of the left and set his sights on the lower end of Cemetery Ridge, near Plum Run and the Trossel Farm. Barksdale was reportedly brought down near the front of the 126th New York. So if you're not familiar, the Trossel Farm is what stop on the auto tour? I should know that. 10? Is it 10? But anyway, that's where Sickles' headquarters was, where he lost his leg. Probably more familiar with that. He gets shot somewhere behind that barn. His exact spot is not known. Prostrated in pain, Barksdale lay on the field until volunteer stretcher bearers from the 14th Vermont arrived. Finding the general in great pain, David Parker, Union soldier, placed Barksdale's head in his lap and administered coffee by the spoonful. In a letter to the family after the war, Parker recalled Barksdale being lucid when found. He knew his death was imminent, but the stout heart was not ready to yield. And Parker, I don't know if I had lost a loved one like this, if I want to know this, but Parker wrote the widow a very long account of what Barksdale was saying to him. And in part it says, "Oh, my wife," Barksdale said, "it will be hard for her. Tell her that my last words were words of love to her, but my boys, oh, it seems that I cannot leave them. Their loss they will not fully comprehend. They need a father. Many times have I thought and planned for their future, and oh, I love them. So to leave them is the hardest struggle I ever knew. But tell them all that I died like a brave man, that I led my men fearlessly in the fight." Talk about a tough dude. "I was wounded by a rifle ball in the left limb above the knee, but I led my men fearlessly in the fight. I was wounded by a rifle ball in the left limb above the knee, but I still led them on. Next, I was wounded by having my left foot took off, or nearly off, near the arch by a cannonball. Though I was weak from loss of blood, still I rode my horse and led my men in the fiercest of the charge that we broke the lines and drove our enemy. At the moment of success, I was pierced by a ball through the breast, knocked senseless from my horse, and left by my soldiers for dead. And tell them all my friends at home," he puts in parentheses, the following he repeated several times during the night, "that I never have regretted the steps I have taken. And although dying, I do not regret my steps now." Barksdale subsequently passed out from the pain. Stretcher bearers bore him to the Jacob Hummelbaugh farmstead, which still stands today. That's right across from the modern maintenance shed near the Pennsylvania Memorial. And there he came under the care of musician Robert Cassidy from the 14th Vermont, and Dr. Alfred T Hamilton, who is this gentleman right here, of the 148th Pennsylvania. 27, he's obviously not 27 there, but 27-year-old Hamilton had only recently joined the regiment in February. Hailing from Lewistown, Pennsylvania, he was a practitioner of the Hygienic Hydropathic School of Medicine and a competent doctor. Dr. Hamilton kept a diary during the war and later utilized it in the post-war years to recount Barksdale's final moments. I attended General Barksdale of Mississippi. He goes on to detail his wounds, which I've already said. He asked, Barksdale that is, asked several times whether I considered his wound necessarily mortal. I told him I did. He desired peace, but only upon terms that would recognize the Confederacy. He was a large, corpulent, refined in appearance, bald, and his general physical and mental makeup indicated firmness, endurance, vigor, quick perception, and ability to succeed, whether as a politician, civilian, or warrior. Barksdale relates his political career to the doctor. And then he asked about the Union Army. This is interesting. Hamilton says that Barksdale was dressed in the jeans of their choice, jean cloth. Barksdale had on a Confederate jean cloth uniform. His short roundabout was trimmed on the sleeves with gold braid. The Mississippi button with a star in the center closed it. He's got good detail. The collar had 3 stars on each side next to the chin, and next to his body was a fine linen or cotton shirt, which was closed by 3 studs bearing the Masonic emblems. His pants had 2 stripes of gold braid, half an inch broad down each leg, and thus conditioned the politician and warrior was laid on the sacred soil of Pennsylvania to breathe his last. Now this is going to blow your mind here. What I couldn't determine before I move off this slide right here was whether Hamilton was a Mason. I don't know. I could not, rule it out or rule it in right here. But you will never believe, if this guy wasn't a Mason, you will never believe what he proceeded to keep out of everything. That's his shirt stud. That's Barksdale's shirt stud. And do you believe we have that in our collection here down in the basement? All right? And you know what else he kept? Now, this has anything to do with the Masons right here. He also kept, well, maybe you won't be finding that one out. One of the bullets he extracted from Barksdale. Does it get any better? Huh?
Yeah, bring them, show them to us.
Yeah, take it out and play with it. Surgical kit he used. Field kit he used on Barksdale. All of that is in the collection right there. Pretty cool. Barksdale stars are actually, souvenir hunters, stripped him pretty fast. But his stars are in the Mississippi State History Museum, which are brought home. Now, this gets even more interesting. An unknown Samaritan also went to great lengths after Barksdale's death to put together a final resting place for him, including a footstone. A newspaper correspondent made the following notes on the grave, which he saw shortly after the battle. This is once again not far from here, actually, along the Taneytown Road. By the side of a road is the grave of Confederate General Barksdale. It is a plain mound with rough pine head and footboards. At his head, written with a lead pencil, is the following inscription: Brigadier General Barksdale, McLaw's Division, Longstreet's Corps, died July 3rd, wounded in left breast, left leg broken, 8 years a representative in Congress. At the foot, written in the same hand, at the footstone, is General Barksdale, CSA. All right, the end of the article is this: at the Confederate general's feet and almost touching him, it lies so close is the grave of a slain federal officer The headboard tells us it is Captain Foster of the 148th Pennsylvania Volunteers. At the captain's foot is the grave of N.M. Wilson of the 11th Massachusetts. There they lie, New England, Pennsylvania, and the South. Two of them bitter enemies during life, but sleeping their last sleep together on the soil of the other's native state. End of quote. Barksdale remained buried in Pennsylvania until January of 1867. His nephew, Lieutenant Harris Barksdale, had the body exhumed and embalmed. I don't know why you'd have it embalmed, before starting the journey home to Mississippi. I'm sure that was a short process. A committee of citizens greeted the train at the Jackson, Mississippi depot and conducted the remains to the Capitol, where Barksdale lay in state in the rotunda. On January 10th, 1868, sorry I couldn't get a clear picture of that, Barksdale's remains were laid to rest. Local Masons gathered at the Jackson Lodge prior to the funeral, and Colonel Harvey Washington Walter led the Masonic contingent and served as master of Masonic ceremonies when they buried Barksdale in his native state. Right there. So I have to think, now I can't prove or disprove, I have to think that some of the care that was taken of Barksdale as he's meeting Masons. Now I don't know, I doubt the doctor had time to go back there and dig a grave, but that doesn't mean other Masons were around and so forth. But you see, when I'm trying to drive home to you, do you see how war doesn't even break the bonds of fraternity? That's the big thing. Who's that guy? Yes, bet y'all never heard of him. All right, no other soldier's fatal wounding at Gettysburg captures the public imagination like Lewis A. Armistead. It's done. However, the majority of the public do not know of Armistead's Masonic background and the influence that it had in the aftermath of Pickett's charge. A brief synopsis, but setting up Gettysburg, I think this is pertinent. During the 1850s, Armistead served primarily on the frontier at various garrisons, Missouri, Minnesota, Iowa, Kansas. The impending Civil War found Armistead as the post commander at New San Diego Barracks, California. Armistead had anxiously awaited the decision of his native state of Virginia, and when Virginia seceded, Armistead resigned his commission to date from May 26. Before leaving, Armistead went to Los Angeles to visit an old Army friend. That old Army friend's name was Winfield Scott Hancock, and Armistead had met Hancock earlier in 1844 while both men were stationed at Fort Towson, and the two became fast friends. The one thing I note, if I can do an aside right here, the one thing I note about the two common things that I find between Armistead and Hancock is they are professional military officers. And the thing that hits me about both men is they are very strict disciplinarians. Like, they don't put up with that. But there's also, I think, Armistead especially, when you're a professionally trained military officer, there is enlisted men, and then there are officers. You do not fraternize with enlisted men. There is a clear segregation between the two sides right there. So when you go out, you are a stern officer. When you go back to the officers' barracks and you walk in there, you can let your guard down. And whatever was happening, there was chemistry between Armistead and Hancock. And they also have the Army to complain about. So I'm sure they got along fine. So Armistead goes to say goodbye to Hancock. This is June 15th, 1861. The only account of the evening is given by Hancock's wife, Almira. She stated that future Confederate General, I did not know this, that future Confederate General Albert Sidney Johnson and his wife were present. I did not know that, along with several other guests. At some point, General Johnson said to his wife, "Come, sing me one or two of the old songs you used to sing. Mary of Argyle," am I saying that right? "And Kathleen
Mavorny.
Mavorny. That's not how it's spelled.
There is an N now. Mavorny.
Mavorny. Did I pronounce that right?
It says malarkey.
I reckon so. Something works. Best thing I've had in a while. I tell you what, I could get a whole division to re-up my attack. 2 days rest with a case of Coke. All right, Elmira, his wife, concluded about this meeting. All were endeavoring to conceal under smiling exteriors hearts that were filled with sadness over the sundering of lifelong ties and doubts as to the result of their sacrifice. The most crushed of this party was Major Armistead, who with tears which were contagious streaming down his face and hands upon Mr. Hancock's shoulders, while looking him steadily in the eye, said, "Hancock, goodbye. You can never know what this has cost me, and I hope God will strike me dead if I am ever induced to leave my native soil should worse come to worse." Turning to me, he placed a small satchel in my hand, requesting that it should not be opened except in the event of his death, in which case the souvenirs it contained, with the exception of a little prayer book intended for me, and which I still possess, should be sent to his family. On the flyleaf of this book is the following prayer book: Louis A. Armistead, trust in God and fear nothing. In September of '61, a few months later, Armistead is accepted a colonel's commission in command of the 57th Virginia. True Armistead fashion, he whipped it into a first-rate unit, drilling it constantly. Ironically, Armistead did not lead the 57th in any notable action before he was promoted to brigade commander. This was on April 1st, 1862. At Seven Pines, his first battle as brigade commander, his unit broke under the heavy Union artillery fire. All right, 1 month later, Armistead found himself in the unenviable position of leading off the assault against a strong Union position on Malvern Hill. Now, there was one Georgian, unrelated, I know he's a Virginian, but one Georgian said that Armistead during this battle was hiding behind a tree while the artillery fire was going on. He said he knew that Armistead was hiding behind the tree because he was hiding behind the tree with him. And that got to be the nickname of Armistead, you probably never heard of, Poplar General. I'm trying here. The subsequent charge cost him 388 casualties, if you can imagine. Now, fast forward to Gettysburg, Armistead's brigade deployed in the rear behind the other two brigades in the division. This is the Stop 5. I can remember that one, the Virginia Memorial. He and his men spent the morning in a pensive mood. Come up with that word, pensive, myself. While awaiting the start of the expected assault. At 1:07 in the afternoon, 1:07. Now, Scott Hartwig told me this before he retired. Now, he'll deny it if you go ask him, but I swear to you, he came out and audited my program, and he told me, direct from his mouth, that it wasn't 148, and it wasn't 146. It was 147 Confederate cannon in that bombardment. And for the last 20 years, it's been 147 cannon every time I do that tour. For his part, Armistead remained on his feet and paced back and forth in front of his men throughout the storm of missiles. As the bombardment subsided and the time came to move forward, Armistead, I think they tried to do this in the movie, they didn't quite get it right. Armistead approached the color bearer of the 57th Virginia, Leander Blackwell, and he said, "Sergeant, are you going to put those colors on the enemy's works today?" "I will try, sir," responded Blackburn, "and if mortal man can do it, it shall be done." Armistead then produced the flask and shared a drink with Blackburn before turning back to lead his command forward. While calling his men to attention, the old line officer's voice rang across the field. "Men, remember what you are fighting for. your homes, your firesides, and your sweethearts. Follow me. Armistead placed his hat on the tip of his sword, held it aloft, and led his men forward. Through shot and shell, he and his Virginians crossed the field. The line eventually came to a halt at the Union position on Cemetery Ridge. Having lost unit cohesion and momentum, Armistead sought a way to get the line moving again. Turning to Colonel Raleigh Martin of the 53rd, Armistead yelled, "Colonel, we can't stay here." And Martin responded, "Then we'll go forward." Armistead, with that stentorian voice resonating to those around him, stood across the stone wall and yelled, "Come forward, Virginians. Come on, boys. We must give them the cold steel. Who will follow me?" And over the wall he went. With hat held high, that's a cool painting, isn't it? With hat held high on the tip of his sword, Armistead went with approximately 100 of his men, we don't really know, and approaching the abandoned guns of Alonzo Cushing's Union battery, Armistead exhorted his men to turn them upon their original owners. Soon after, 2 bullets struck him simultaneously, one in the left leg and one in the right arm, and the general fell. With Armistead's fall, the Confederate sortie receded to the stone wall, and it was not long thereafter that it all ended. Either you surrendered or you ran. What emerged in the aftermath of that, as one Union veteran said, that little acre, when you go out and see Stop 15 today, the high water mark, one Union veteran said in the aftermath that it was ever a hell on earth. That was it. It was just, I've been here a couple decades off and on, and I still can't picture that. I got some kids out here that are playing Civil War, did the same thing. My grandmother couldn't do a sew job quite as good as you. Mine was a little bit more homespun, if you know what I mean. But I wore my Confederate uniform till the kepi dry rotted. In fact, I just found it since I've been moving. And you know what? It's still dry rotted. Darndest thing. Right there. That's cool, though. But in the aftermath of this, Jacob Wildermore of the 72nd Pennsylvania heard something. As the fighting began to wane, Wildermore, quote, caught some whispered words from a wounded Confederate officer lying nearby. Turning to his comrades, Wildermore said, quote, "This man asks for help. He says he is the son of a widow." Now, why would anybody, in the middle of an aftermath of a battle, say that? Now, why would anybody say that?
That's a Masonic thing.
The significance of that plea, we're going to get a brawl started in here before it's all over. I'm a bigger Mason than you are. All right, what kind of powers do you have?
Ask them all.
All right, quote, "The significance of that plea was not fully comprehended by Comrade Wildermore. He only understood that somewhere in the Southland, the dying officer had a widowed mother. Others who knew the import of calling for the help as the son of a widowed mother did, though. Soon soldiers from the 72nd Pennsylvania came running to Lieutenant Colonel Charles Baines, asking permission to carry a wounded rebel officer out of the battle. Quote, "He has called for help as the son of the widow," they reported. Baines instantly issued an order to carry him to an ambulance. The amount of attention Armistead received from the Masons should come as little surprise. Armistead joined the Masonic fraternity over 2 decades before the war. In 1839, he received his first degree from Hiram Lodge number 21 in Winchester, Virginia. 12 years later, he petitioned the Alexandria Washington Lodge number 22 to successfully complete his 2nd and 3rd degrees. In 1856, while serving at Fort Riley, Kansas, Armistead and several other Masons petitioned the Grand Lodge of Kansas to form a new lodge at the military post. Permission being granted, Union Lodge number 7, AF and AM began on June 20th, 1857, with Armistead serving as senior warden. Lodge tradition, is he still awake up there? Is he? All right. Lodge tradition states, you listening, Mr. Lamar? Lodge tradition states that Armistead's wife served as Tyler on at least one occasion. That's sort of an officer in the thing, which is interesting. Now, although Union soldiers knew they were helping a fellow Mason and a high-ranking officer, Armistead apparently had not revealed his personal identity. For whatever reason, Union soldiers came to the conclusion that they didn't have Lewis Armistead, that they actually had James Longstreet. Most of you don't know this story, I don't think. And they thought that they now had Longstreet as a prisoner. On the Confederate side, British observer Arthur Freemantle witnessed a flag of truce in the aftermath coming to the lines. The bearer, quote, announced among other things that General Longstreet was wounded and a prisoner, but would be taken care of. An amused General Longstreet responded that he was extremely grateful, but that being neither wounded nor a prisoner, he was quite able to take care of himself. Meanwhile, on Cemetery Ridge, Union soldiers carried Armistead on a stretcher to get medical aid, and a large group of Union soldiers surrounding a rebel officer soon attracted the attention of Henry H. Bingham, who's the gentleman on the slide right here. His fate decreed, Captain Bingham served as on the staff of 2nd Corps Commander Winfield S. Hancock, who was a personal friend of Armistead. Bingham was steeped in Masonic tradition also. He was a member of the Chartiers Lodge number 297 of Cannonsburg, am I saying that? Cannonsburg, Pennsylvania, and life member of the Union Lodge number 121 in Philadelphia. In 1869, Bingham wrote Hancock his recollection of meeting Armistead. I met Armistead just under the crest of the hill, being carried to the rear by several privates. I ordered them back. They replied that they had with them an important prisoner and designated him as General Longstreet. By this time, I saw from the ornaments on his dress that he was an officer of rank, and impressed with the importance of carefully attending to the security of a commander holding the rank of Longstreet and observing the great suffering the prisoner was in, I dismounted from my horse and inquired of the prisoner his name. He replied, General Armistead of the Confederate Army. Observing that his suffering was very great, I said to him, General, I am Captain Bingham of General Hancock's staff, and if you have anything valuable in your possession which you desire taken care of, I will take care of it for you. He then asked me if it was General Winfield Scott Hancock, and upon replying in the affirmative, he informed me he's writing Hancock, that you were an old and valued friend of his, and that he desired me to say to you, tell General Hancock for me that I have done him and done you all an injury which I shall regret or repent. I forget the exact word. The longest day I live. I then obtained his spurs, watch, chain, seal, and pocketbook. Surely he got the flash too. I told the men to take him to the rear to one of the hospitals. Interestingly, Bingham does not mention any exchange of Masonic greeting or distress with Armistead. But that doesn't mean that Armistead did not identify himself as a Mason. These old Masons some of them were a little bit more particular about this stuff than others. It could be a number of things. Armistead could have identified himself. The soldiers that were carrying him obviously knew he was a Mason. They could have told Bingham. I don't know if Bingham had a symbol on him or whatever. Or it could not have been passed. I have to say that too. Maybe they didn't know. But regardless, I'm leaning toward they knew that something transpired right there, but Bingham didn't acknowledge it. But above all, what is known is Bingham's a Mason, Armistead's a Mason, Hancock's a Mason. And you've got all this, and as you know, you Gettysburg buffs know, Hancock lies wounded a couple 100 yards down to the south, except Armistead didn't know that at the time. Now, all this combined, the fraternity, the Masonic fraternity, the officers' corps, and the fraternity that comes with that, everything combined, Above all, Armistead had no problem handing over his personal possessions to a complete stranger. What does that tell you?
Trust.
And right down there lay his friend. I picked that picture out because I didn't think y'all had seen that one either. Right there. Right there. All right, one more. We'll get out of here. I'm over time. This is short. What's this thing? You don't know? Read it. I think you can get this in the bookstore. Sheldon Munn, M-U-N-N, is called, I think I got it right, Freemasons at Gettysburg. Is that right? Fort, is that right, Larry? In January 1990, Sheldon Munn, who's the author of the book also, conceived the idea for the Friend to Friend monument. Local Gettysburg brother John F. Schwartz assisted Brother Munn in the process, including, quote, the initial concept of a Masonic monument, including proposed sites, designs, prices, and initial contacts with the MPS, National Park Service, and the sculptor. Upon taking office in 1992, Grand Master Edward H. Fowler Jr. put the weight of his position behind the project, along with Washington political support. You wouldn't believe there's probably some Masons in Congress. The Lodge of Pennsylvania. It never ceases to amaze me where this Masonic stuff pops up. When you walk in the library at Ole Miss, you walk right in there, and there's that triangle, pyramid, I should say, with the all-seeing eye. Now, what's it doing at the main entrance right on the floor? Huge. Huge. Right there. How did they get there? And you know what? I won't say it because I don't want y'all going down there. But and ruining it. But the local lodge from back home has always met above the Mississippi Unemployment Agency. Now, how did they ever get that contract? Right there. Very cool. The Lodge of Pennsylvania first considered, y'all would find this interesting, the Lodge of Pennsylvania first considered placing the monument near the present-day Peace Light Memorial. The National Park Service rejected the idea, though, and suggested the National Cemetery Annex as an alternative site. The Masons were agreeable to the idea. However, the sculptor, Ron Tunnison, needed a year to complete the project. Therefore, the Masons reserved a 2-acre site in adjacent Evergreen Cemetery, which is the city cemetery, in case the National Park Service did not approve the National Cemetery Annex location. So they hedged their bets. The initial proposal for the monument called for 2 figures, Armistead and Hancock shaking hands. The National Park Service, though, rejected the idea as not being historically accurate. National Park Service historian Kathy George Harrison recommended the incident of the wounded Armistead. Oops, already had that slide up. Well, apparently reverse is broke. Kathy George Harrison recommended the incident of the wounded Armistead handing his possessions over to Union Captain Henry Bingham. The initial sketch for the monument was based on the Gettysburg Commandery's banner, which hangs in the local Masonic lodge, and James Walker's panoramic painting, quote, repulse of Longstreet's assault. On August 21st, 1993, the Friend to Friend Masonic Memorial Monument was dedicated in the annex of the National Cemetery. In the opening prayer, and in conclusion, how about the closing prayer? The Grand Chaplain beseeched for the monument. May it ever admonish thy people of the folly and wickedness of rebellion and the wisdom of duty and obedience to thy laws. Built with no untempered materials, fashioned in symmetry and beauty, and anchored as a symbol of the power and glory of a brotherhood undivided. May it inspire all of us to do our part in erecting and building the superstructure of national and individual character that shall be true to the principles of justice and righteousness, of purity and equity, and of universal liberty. Freemasons at Gettysburg. Thank y'all very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, we're going to do our usual thing. I'm going to give you 10-15 minutes to y'all to get on out of here if you want to. Those you got questions will resume in just a minute, but let's let everybody leave that wants to leave. I'm sure your butts are tired by now, right? Thank y'all for coming. I really sincerely appreciate it.
Oh.